When you think about the real giants of American literature, there are names that just immediately bring something to mind, right?
Completely.
And today we are diving deep, really deep into the early years of one of the most, well, maybe one of the most mysterious figures, Edgar Allan Poe,
Hmm.
born 1809, died 1849, way too young. But Poe, he wasn't just writing, he was actually building
That's
genres.
a great way to put it.
Poet, editor, a critic who definitely didn't hold back. A big deal in American Romanticism, Gothic fiction. He pretty much mastered the short story form.
And detective fiction. Most people agree he basically invented it.
Right, inventor of detective fiction. Plus, he had a hand in shaping early science fiction, too. Well, it's a lot.
It really is. And
Yeah.
what's also fascinating, and maybe not talked about enough, is that he was the first major American writer to really try and make a living just from writing.
Yeah, which back then was incredibly tough. It often meant, serious money problems.
Exactly. That struggle is key. So for this deep dive into Poe's early life, we're leaning on a couple of main sources. First, the big Wikipedia entry on him gives us that solid factual grounding.
Okay.
And second, there's this scholarly Commons article, How Poe's Life Leaked into His Works. Pretty descriptive title, right? It really looks at how his own life, his experiences, just seeped into his writing.
Love that title. And that's our mission here, isn't it? To get past just the dates and facts and really understand what made Poe, well, Poe, especially in those formative early years. We want to unpack those key moments, see how he started out in that, frankly, brutal literary world. And like that article suggests, see how his own journey really fueled those haunting, groundbreaking stories he became famous for.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's jump in. Early life and education. And ordinary is not the word I'd use.
Not at all. So he was born Edgar Poe in Boston, the second of three kids. His parents, David Poe Jr. and Elizabeth Arnold Hopkins Poe, they're actors. But things went south pretty quickly. His dad just left the family in 1810. Edgar was only 1. And then, the next year, his mother died. Pulmonary tuberculosis.
Wow, so young. That kind of loss so early. It must have just cast a huge shadow.
You have to think so. After his mother died, he was taken in by John and Frances Allan in Richmond, Virginia. Now, they never formally adopted them, but that's where the Allan in his name comes from.
Okay. And the Allans, they were pretty well off business people.
Yeah, they were involved in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Cloth, wheat, tombstones, tobacco. And it's important to note they were also involved in the slave trade.
Right. A grim reality of the time.
Definitely. And what's interesting about John Allan, the stepfather figure, is how he apparently raised Edgar. Sources say he was really inconsistent.
How so?
Like sometimes spoiling him, other times being really strict, even aggressively disciplining him. That kind of up and down. It probably created a sense of instability, maybe, potentially feeding into those themes of chaos you see later in his work.
That's a fascinating connection. So then, 1815, the family actually moves to the UK.
They did. Poe went to grammar school in Irvine, Scotland, where John Allan was from, then a boarding school in Chelsea, London, and another school near London. They came back to Richmond around 1820.
And even as a kid, he had some interesting experiences, like being part of that youth honor guard for Lafayette's visit.
Yeah, in 1824. Shows maybe a bit of youthful standing, perhaps?
And then the Allans' money situation changed dramatically.
Big time. 1825, John Allan inherits a fortune. We're talking like over $20 million in today's money.
Yeah.
Bought a big house called Moldavia. So maybe a brief moment of seeming security for Poe there.
Maybe, but it feels like stability was always just slipping away for him because
Yeah.
soon after, 1926, he's off to the University of Virginia studying languages.
Right. And there was maybe a young romance before that with a Sarah Elmira Royster.
Ah, young love. But university wasn't smooth sailing either. UVA had that unique student self-government system.
Yeah, which sounded progressive, but it also meant a lot of students, well, didn't stick around. And for Poe, it quickly became about money problems and arguments with John Allan.
He felt Allan wasn't giving him enough cash.
That was Poe's side. Led to gambling debts, apparently, and a major falling out with Allan. He also lost touch with Sarah Royster then, left UVA after just a year, found out she'd married someone else.
Ouch. Double whammy. So by April 1827, here's young Poe, probably feeling broke and alone, back in Boston, doing odd jobs, even using a fake name. Henri Le Rene.
Yep. Quite a turnaround from being the ward of a wealthy merchant.
Definitely. And this period of struggle, it leads him somewhere pretty unexpected, right? The military.
Exactly. Couldn't support himself, so May 1827, he enlists U.S. Army under another fake name, Edgar A. Perry.
And lied about his age, too.
Claimed he was 22, but he was only 18. Started out at Fort Independence in Boston Harbor, making $5 a month.
Wow. But amazingly, even while doing that, his writing ambitions are starting to actually happen. His first book comes out.
Tamerlane and other poems, yeah.
Yeah.
1827.
Yeah.
Just credited to a Bostonian. Tiny print run, like 50 copies. Didn't make any waves then, but still, that's his first published book.
A huge step, even if quiet.
For sure.
Yeah.
He kept serving, got posted down to Fort Moultrie in Charleston, South Carolina, got promoted to artificer, basically preparing artillery shells. Pay doubled.
Okay.
Served 2 years total, and actually did really well. Made it to sergeant major for artillery, the highest rank for a non-commissioned officer.
That's impressive. But then he wanted out.
Yeah, after 2 years, he wanted an early discharge. He actually came clean about who he was to a Lieutenant Howard.
Risky.
Could have been. But Howard agreed to help, but only if Poe could patch things up with John Allan.
Back to Allan again. And Allan wasn't keen at first?
Nope, still seemed pretty cold. But then Allan's wife, Frances, who maybe had a softer spot for Edgar, she died in February 1829.
Oh.
And that seemed to change things. Allan softened up a bit and actually agreed to support Poe going to West Point.
Yeah.
Poe's new plan.
West Point. Okay. So he gets out of the Army.
Honorably discharged, April 1829, after they found someone to take over his duties. Then he heads to Baltimore.
And who does he stay with there?
His aunt, Maria Clem, she was widowed, and her family. That included his very young cousin, Virginia Eliza Clem, his brother Henry, and his grandmother.
Right. The Clems become really important later. And Baltimore seems like a turning point for his writing, too.
It really does, because in September 1829, he gets his first real nod of encouragement from a big-name critic, John Neal.
That must have meant the world to him.
Had to. Poe actually dedicated a poem to Neal in his second book, Al-Araf, Tamerlane, and Minor Poems, which came out in Baltimore that same year, 1829.
So things are looking up, maybe. He gets into West Point.
He does. Starts July 1st, 1830. But that relationship with John Allan just couldn't be fixed.
What happened now?
Allan remarried in October 1830. And apparently there were ongoing arguments, maybe about Allan's affairs, whatever it was. Allan just completely disowned Poe, cut him off entirely.
Wow. So Poe's at West Point, but his financial lifeline, however shaky, is just gone.
Pretty much. And Poe seems to make a very deliberate choice then. He basically gets himself kicked out. Intentionally got himself court-martialed. February 1831, gross neglect of duty, disobeying orders, skipping formations, classes, even church.
He engineered it.
Looks like it. He pleaded not guilty, probably knowing it would just guarantee he'd be dismissed. He wanted out, wanted to be free to write.
A dramatic exit, but effective, I guess.
It was. He leaves West Point, heads to New York. And in 1831, gets his third book of poems published, just called Poems.
How did he afford that if Allan cut him off?
Get this, his fellow cadets at West Point chipped in to finance it.
No way. So they must have actually respected his talent, even if he flamed out.
Seems that way. And this collection had some poems that would become pretty famous later, like To Helen and The City and the Sea.
Okay, so he's out, he's published again, he goes back to Baltimore.
Back to Baltimore, March 1831. But then, more tragedy. His brother Henry dies in August. Complications from alcoholism.
Man, just relentless loss for him. Parents, now his brother.
Yeah. It's just a constant theme in these early years. Loss, instability. You can really feel how that might just soak into his writing, can't you? Setting the stage for, well, everything that came next.
Absolutely. Which brings us to him really trying to make it as a professional writer.
Precisely. And after Henry's death, trying to actually live off his writing was tough going at first. Really tough.
Why was it so hard back then?
Well, part of it was the whole copyright situation, or lack thereof, really. There wasn't strong international copyright law, so American publishers, they could just print cheap, unauthorized copies of popular British books. Why pay a new American writer?
So it was cheaper to just pirate Dickens or Scott than take a chance on someone like Poe.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Plus, you had the economy. The Panic of 1837 didn't help things either. It's, kind of ironic that a writer so obsessed with the macabre was also dealing with the very real horror of maybe not making rent.
That constant financial anxiety. It must have just been grinding.
Had to be. And you mentioned the literary world. Yeah, there were more magazines and periodicals popping up, which sounds good. But a lot of them didn't last long. And even if they did, getting paid reliably, that was another story entirely. Very precarious.
So facing all that, it seems like he made a strategic shift. Less poetry, more prose.
Yeah, that seems to be around the time he really pivots. Maybe some of the criticism of his poetry, like from Neal earlier, played a part. But prose, short stories, seemed like a more viable path, maybe.
He started getting some stories published.
He did manage to place some in Philadelphia publications. Yeah. He even started writing a play, his only one, Volition. But the real sort of mini breakthrough came in October 1833.
What happened then?
He won a prize from the Baltimore Saturday Visitor for MS script found in a bottle.
Okay. Recognition. And money, presumably.
And attention. Crucially, it brought him to the notice of some influential people, like John P. Kennedy, who was a respected writer himself.
And Kennedy helped him out.
Big time. Kennedy didn't just help Poe publish more stories. He introduced him to Thomas W. White. White was the editor of the Southern Literary Messenger down in Richmond.
Ah, the Messenger. That becomes important.
Very. This connection leads to Poe getting a job there as an assistant editor in 1835. Though that first stint didn't last long.
Why not? What happened?
Well, the story goes he was let go after just a few weeks. Rumors were it was because of, well, drinking.
A recurring issue, or rumor at least.
Seems so. It wasn't the end of the story with the Messenger. He goes back to Baltimore, and then things get personally complicated again.
Oh, so?
He gets a marriage license in September 1835 to marry his cousin, Virginia Clem.
His cousin, and wasn't she really young?
She was, only 13 at the time the license was issued. It's definitely one of the more unsettling aspects of his life for modern readers. Whether they actually married right then is a bit unclear.
Right. Yeah. But professionally, he gets another chance.
Remarkably, yes. Thomas White, the editor at the Messenger, he actually takes Poe back. Apparently, Poe promised to clean up his act, behave better.
Okay.
So Poe returns to Richmond, brings Virginia and her mother, Maria Clem, with him, and this second stint at the Messenger is much more successful.
He stayed longer this time.
Yeah, until January 1837. And he was incredibly productive. He later claimed the magazine's circulation went way up while he was there, from like 700 to 3,500.
So he was making an impact as an editor and critic.
Definitely. And writing. He published poems, tons of book reviews, often quite savage ones, critical essays, articles, and, of course, his own short stories in the paper.
And the marriage to Virginia became official then, too.
Yes, they were officially married in Richmond in May 1836. She was still very young, just turned 14.
So by the mid-1830s, he's kind of established himself, at least within that literary circle, moving around, publishing, editing, but still shadowed by instability.
That sums it up well. He's building a career, getting noticed, but it's always intertwined with personal difficulties and that financial precariousness. But it's definitely during this time that his unique literary voice really starts to solidify.
And that voice, even early on, was something else, wasn't it? He really started writing seriously around 1832, first story anonymous. But those themes were there early. Eerie, unsettling.
Oh, yeah. Very different from what most American writers were doing then. Romanticism was big, focusing on emotion, nature, individualism. Gothic fiction existed, exploring darkness and the supernatural. Poe took those threads and waved them into something uniquely American and uniquely Poe. It was pretty controversial stuff for the time.
Because it was so dark, so focused on death and the supernatural.
Exactly. His early stories are full of it. Supernatural events, death, what happens after death.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were whispers even then, people saying he must be drunk or on drugs to write like that.
But no real proof of that.
No solid evidence that he was writing while under the influence. It was more likely speculation based on the darkness of the work and, well, his known struggles.
But as that article I mentioned points out, how Poe's life leaked into his works, it feels undeniable that his actual life experience are feeding directly into this.
Absolutely.
All that lost his parents, his brother, the uncertainty with the Allans, the money worries. It's hard not to see the connection between that real-life darkness and the themes dominating his fiction, right? That preoccupation with death, mourning, the fragile barrier between life and death. It feels like it stems right from losing people so young.
That's a crucial insight, I think. Those personal wounds, that constant sense of loss and fighting for stability, they absolutely shaped his creative vision. They fueled the Gothic sensibility, the deep dive into morbid themes that became his trademark.
So as we kind of wrap up this look at his early life, you really get a sense of the sheer difficulty of it all. Abandonment, death, the weirdness with the Allans, the constant money stress, trying to just launch a career.
He was anything but smooth sailing.
Not at all. And yet, against that really tough backdrop, you see this undeniably original, powerful talent starting to bloom, a talent that was going to change American literature and honestly influence writers all over the world.
It's an amazing contrast, isn't it? the grim reality of his struggles versus these incredible, terrifying, fantastical worlds he was creating.
Yeah. You can almost feel the pressure of those early years and the darkness of the later, more famous stuff. Like the foundation was built on all that hardship.
Indeed. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
How do you think Poe's constant battle, not just for artistic recognition, but just to survive as a writer in that early American scene, always scraping by, how might that have shaped his sharp, often critical views on the whole literary world and his relentless drive for originality?
That's a great question. How fighting the system might make you want to completely break its rules artistically. Something to definitely think about next time you read one of his tales.